The witch horror stories you're about to hear carry secrets that survived through generations. Dark presences, curses, and encounters that don't make any sense. Like in the story you're about to see, where a quiet night on a ranch in Texas gets interrupted by something that looked half owl, half human. But before we start this story, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any terrifying stories. And tell me down in the comments which city or country you're watching this video from. We just wanted to finish up before dark, but the sky was already stained red when we heard the first strange sound coming from the woods. There was a broken fence at the back of Jake's ranch, right where the thickest part of the brush started. It was one of those places nobody went near, especially after sundown. Not out of fear exactly, more like unease, a weird feeling, like the air there was heavier. But the fence was down, and cattle had been going missing, so we didn't have a choice. We had to go check it out. It was me, Jake, and Tyler, two guys I'd known since high school. Jake inherited the ranch after his old man passed, and Tyler was the kind of guy who'd do just about anything if there was a beer in it for him at the end. We'd spent the whole day pounding posts, stretching wire, and trying not to die from the heat. The crickets, the rustling leaves, it was all just background noise on the ranch. But that evening, something felt off. A heavy kind of silence between the sounds, like the whole place was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. By the time we wrapped up, the sun had already dipped behind the hills. Jake suggested we camp out right there, near the old barn, just for kicks. He brought out some folding chairs, a few cold ones, and got a fire going. Tyler started in on those stories he swore were true. Ghosts on back roads, shadows in abandoned silos, kids vanishing in the cornfields. Most of it was bullshit, but with the firelight flickering and the dark pressing in around us, it all felt a little too real. Then the temperature dropped, fast. You know that sudden shift that makes the sweat on your skin turn icy? That's what it was like. A strange wind cut through the pasture, bending the trees like they were trying to get away from something. Tyler cracked a joke about the old ranch breathing hard again. Nobody laughed. That's when we heard it, a sharp, high-pitched scream, slicing through the air like a blade. It didn't sound like any animal we knew. Not a coyote, not an owl, not a fox. It was something else. Half-human wail, half-animal cry. We froze. I felt a chill run from the base of my spine to the back of my neck. Jake stood up slow, eyes locked on the darkness. Tyler whispered, "You guys heard that, right?" A few more seconds of silence. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the air, like it was trying to warn us. Then we saw it. Perched on one of the wooden fence posts at the edge of the property, there was a shape. Big, completely still, with eyes glowing faintly red, like dying embers. At first, it looked like a giant owl, but something was wrong with the way it was built. The proportions didn't add up. Its wings were too long, too arched. Its head turned slowly, like it was scanning us. The feeling was like being watched by something that already knew what we were going to do before we even decided. Tyler took a step back and tripped over a root. He hit the ground hard and scrambled up, but his eyes were wide with panic. "That's not just an owl. That thing ain't right. That's a Lechuza." I'd never heard the word before, but Jake went pale. "A Lechuza," he said, almost whispering. "It's like a witch. One that turns into an owl to spy or attack at night. My grandpa swore he saw one when he was a kid. Said it stole children. And if you whistle at it, it comes for you." The silence came back, but this time it wasn't just uncomfortable. It was suffocating. That thing was still there, perched on the post, staring at us. The air felt thick, like time had frozen. And then, like an idiot, I whistled. I don't know why I did it. Maybe to break the tension, maybe out of nerves. Maybe because part of me just didn't believe any of it. But the second the sound cut through the air, the creature answered. It let out a scream that felt like it was coming from inside my skull. Then it spread its wings. Those wings seemed to blot out half the sky, even in the dark. The sound they made cutting through the air wasn't like any bird I'd ever heard. It was deeper, like the wind itself was terrified. The thing launched off the post with impossible speed. The fire snuffed out in a gust. Tyler screamed. Jake ran. I stood there for a second that felt like forever. The thing passed over me, and I felt the pressure in my chest like something was trying to rip the air out of my lungs. And then that scream again. Closer now, clearer, and almost human. There was rage in it. Pain. Fury. We ran. We didn't look back, crashing through the fields, kicking roots, stumbling over branches. There was only one direction. The main house. It was the only place with a lock. And lights. We burst in, gasping, nearly knocking the door off its hinges. Jake locked it with shaking hands. Tyler collapsed on the floor, trying to catch his breath. And me? I could still hear that thing outside. Not the screams, the sound of wings beating, slow, rhythmic, like it was circling the house, like it was picking its way in. The house was wrapped in a tense silence, and that sound kept coming from outside, relentless. We knew it wasn't over. Not yet. We sat there in the dark for what felt like hours. Nobody daring to speak, like any sound might draw its attention. All I could hear was my pulse in my throat and that noise. The slow, rhythmic beat of wings, scraping against the silence, like it was counting down to something we didn't understand. Jake was the first to break the silence. He said his grandma used to tell stories about these Lechuzas when he was little. Said they were women who sold themselves to the dark for power, turned into owls to roam at night, hunting for revenge or offerings. According to her, if you whistled at one, it was like an invitation, a challenge. Tyler got pissed, said it was all nonsense, that what we saw was just some oversized bird, maybe sick. But even as he said it, he couldn't stop shaking, and nobody had the guts to look out the window. I tried to come up with some rational explanation. A deformed vulture, a lost eagle, some sick joke. But no matter how hard I tried, nothing made sense. Because beyond the fear, there was something else. That same weird feeling we'd had from the start. A kind of negative energy that made the air thicker, the world heavier. A pressure that didn't come from outside, but from within. The energy in the house felt tainted. Suddenly, the living room light flickered, once, twice, and died. Jake tried to turn it back on, but nothing. We grabbed old lanterns from the pantry and a rusty shotgun his dad had left behind. It wasn't much of a plan, but we had to do something. The sound outside had stopped. In its place was a different kind of silence, heavy, pushing us back against the walls. We decided to go out and investigate. We opened the door slow, lanterns shaking in our hands. Outside, the wind had died completely. The trees didn't move. The sky was clear, but not a single star, like someone had draped a black sheet over everything. The first thing we saw was the post where the creature had been. There were marks, not normal claw marks, deep, twisted like human hands, but with longer, sharper fingers, had gripped it hard. At the base of the post, the grass was crushed and a dark trail led off toward the pasture. We followed it. Looked like something had been dragged, or had dragged itself. Jake led with the shotgun, Tyler with the machete he'd grabbed from the barn, and me with the lantern. The light trembled, and every now and then I thought I saw something move in the shadows. But when I pointed the beam, there was nothing. Then we heard the sound again, but this time it wasn't a scream. It was a whisper, coming from the trees. Low, insistent, like singing. We couldn't make out the words, but it was a woman's voice, and hypnotic. Jake told us to stop, said not to go any farther, but Tyler, stubborn as ever, kept walking toward the sound. We tried to stop him, but he ignored us. When he reached the biggest tree, he froze, staring up into the branches like he saw something the rest of us couldn't. We called to him. He didn't answer, just stood there, eyes locked on something above. Then, without warning, it dropped. Not from the sky, from the tree, like it had been clinging upside down to the branches. It happened too fast. All we saw were legs too thin, arms too long, and the face, or what should have been a face. There were eyes and a mouth, but twisted out of place, and a wide smile, like it had been cut with a razor. It landed on Tyler. We screamed. The lantern fell. The sound of them hitting the ground was sharp, I ran without thinking, grabbed Tyler by the arm and saw his face. Pale, almost lifeless. He was breathing, but he was in some kind of trance. The creature vanished back into the trees like it had never been there. We carried him back as fast as we could, locked the house, and killed all the lights. The thing didn't return. Not that night, at least. Tyler didn't speak for 2 days. When he finally did, he said he didn't remember anything. Just a feeling of being trapped inside his own body, hearing someone call his name in his mother's voice. After that, he left, never came back to the ranch. We tried to make sense of what happened, but there was no explanation. The marks stayed on the post for months, and every now and then we'd still hear the sound of wings in the distance, even on clear nights, even when there was no wind. Like the Lechuza was waiting for someone else to whistle. We learned our lesson. Some things you don't poke, some energies you don't challenge, and that night, someone opened the wrong door. Terrifying, right? What did you think of the story? From 0 to 10, what rating would you give it? Leave your opinion down in the comments. Encounters with creatures like that leave marks you never forget. But sometimes the danger doesn't come from above. It hides in ordinary places like a simple witchcraft shop. The story you're about to see now shows how a place can hold an energy capable of destroying you from inside out. I felt something enter me. It wasn't a scare, not just a feeling, it was physical. Cold, thick, and creeping, like a living mist that knew exactly where to slither in. I wanted to scream, but my throat locked up. My eyes burned, and for a second, I thought my soul had been knocked loose. But let me back up a little, it was all Sarah's fault. She's one of those people who's into energy, crystals, tarot, moon signs, all that stuff. We were traveling through Mexico, taking a break from work, and she lost it when she saw a sign in Spanish, Traditional Witchcraft Apothecary. It was one of those cramped little shops, half hidden in an alley near the historic downtown. I was about to walk right past, but she yanked my arm like a kid pulling me into a candy store. "Just a quick look," she said, and like an idiot, I went in. The shop had an old wooden door that groaned when it opened, like in a horror movie. Inside, the smell hit me hard, a mix of burning herbs, cheap incense, and something old and damp. The walls were painted matte black, barely lit by dim red lamps. It felt more like a basement than a store. Glass jars were everywhere. Some held weird liquids, others had things inside, things I didn't want to look at too closely. A three-eyed rat, a tiny, curled-up fetus, dirty feathers stuck to a bone. The kind of place where time feels like it's moving differently. Sarah was in heaven, of course, picking things up, sniffing bottles, asking the shopkeeper a million questions. The woman was old, short, with deep brown skin and layers of beaded necklaces. She looked like she'd stepped out of some ancient folktale. One of her eyes was milky, like she had a cataract. But the other one, it felt like it was seeing right through me. I stayed quiet, just watching. Then, all of a sudden, I got this weird feeling. A chill down my neck. Not the usual kind. This was wet, like someone had dumped ice water down my back. I broke out in goosebumps. My head spun and I had to steady myself on the counter. That's when I felt it, like smoke rising from the floor and passing through me. Don't ask me how I knew, I just did. It came up under my shirt, spread through my chest, down my arms. The air in the room shifted. For a second I went half deaf, and I swear, I heard a voice. But it was inside my head. I didn't understand the words. Just this dragged-out whisper, a language I'd never heard before. I stumbled out of the shop, pale as a ghost. Sarah followed, worried. She said I looked drained, that I was sweating cold, but I told her it was just exhaustion. We went back to the hotel and I crashed hard. The next day, though, that's when things got really weird. I woke up starving, the kind of hunger that feels like you haven't eaten in days. I went straight to the hotel breakfast, but nothing looked good. Bread, eggs, fruit, it all tasted like nothing. What I wanted was meat, not cooked, raw, and I'm not exaggerating. I'd look at the cured ham on the platter and it called to me. It looked juicy, almost seductive. Sarah noticed I was off, quieter, slower. She said my eyes looked hollow. The world felt like it was a step ahead of me, like my mind had to sprint just to keep up. That afternoon when we went out, I had to sit down every few minutes. Fatigue would hit me out of nowhere, like my body was fighting something I couldn't see. By the third day, I woke up with the taste of blood in my mouth. No cuts, no injuries, but my tongue was too red. My stomach made strange noises, like something alive was in there that didn't belong to me. A sharp pain started in my lower right side. I tried to ignore it, figured it was just something I ate. But that evening, as we walked through a craft fair, my legs gave out. I dropped to my knees, my vision blurring, everything shaking like jelly. The stalls around me faded. I heard distant voices and then black. I woke up in a hospital. White walls, cold, the smell of disinfectant. Sarah was there, her face tight with worry. A doctor came in, spoke slowly, asked a bunch of questions. They ran tests, CT scans, ultrasounds, blood work. Everything came back normal. "You're fine," he said. "Clinically healthy." But I knew I wasn't. Over the next few days, the pain faded. The fatigue went away, the hunger eased up. I went back to normal, or at least that's what everyone thought. But something was wrong. It was like I wasn't alone in my own body anymore. You know that feeling of being watched? I felt it all the time, from the inside out. It was like something in me had woken up and was just waiting. Sometimes, when I looked in the mirror, my reflection took a fraction of a second too long to move. At night, I'd hear whispers in the corner of the room, like words being breathed through the walls. None of them made sense, but all of them sent chills down my spine. Back in Brazil, I tried to forget. I went to a faith healer, a spiritist center, even said prayers. I took salt baths. Nothing changed. One night I dreamed I was back in that shop, but it was different now. The lights were all off. The old woman was gone, just me, and a mirror in the center of the room. I walked up to it in the dream. My reflection was smiling, but I wasn't. I woke up drenched in sweat, the sheet stuck to me, my heart racing. Since that night, I've been writing down everything I feel. And you know what I've noticed? Every time someone says I seem off, quiet or distant. The night before, I've had nightmares. Nightmares with shadows crawling on the floor. Whispers of women's voices calling my name. A figure standing at the foot of my bed. A thin silhouette with long arms and bony fingers like claws. I couldn't see its face, but I smelled the shop. That smell of death, burning herbs, pure bad energy. Now I can control it most of the time. But there are days when I feel that hunger coming back. It's not for food. It's for something else. A void that won't fill. I don't know what got into me in that shop, but it did, and it stayed. And every now and then when the world goes quiet and the room gets dark, I hear that same voice from the day it all started. It still talks to me. And the worst part? Lately, I've started to understand what it's saying. Creepy, right? After stepping inside that dark store, it becomes clear that contact with the occult never comes without consequences. And many times that contact doesn't happen in rituals. It happens inside the family itself, like in the story you're about to see next, where a mother reveals what she witnessed in the backyard at her parents' house. There are some things a kid hears that they never forget, even if no one else takes it seriously, even if time passes and everyone pretends it was just a story, it sticks with you. And the strangest part? The older you get, the more it starts to make sense. Or worse, the more it starts to feel true. I remember my mom used to tell these weird stories, especially when we'd visit my grandparents. Their house was old, with that damp wood smell and the feeling of time standing still. The kind of place that seemed to hold secrets in the cracks of the floorboards. But what really got under my skin was the backyard. It was huge, with these twisted trees, a fountain in the middle that never worked right, and an eerie silence, like even the birds avoided flying over it. I steered clear of that place from the time I was little. I can't explain why exactly, but I always got a bad feeling there, like negative energy hanging in the air, like something was watching. The first time my mom told me the story about the witch, I must have been 8 or 9. It was during one of those weekend visits. My mom, My aunt and I were sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee and eating cake, when out of nowhere, like someone bringing up the weather, my aunt said, "Remember the woman at the fountain?" My mom shot her a look, eyes wide, like she'd forgotten for a second that the memory even existed. And then she started telling the story. She said they were teenagers, maybe 13 or 14. They were home alone one afternoon. Their grandparents had gone out and they were watching TV in the living room when they heard a noise from the backyard. A sound of water, like someone was messing with the fountain. Strange, because that fountain almost never worked, and even when it did, the sound was fainter. They went to the kitchen window and that's when they saw her. A woman hunched over the fountain, drinking water with her hands. Her hair was long and tangled, almost sticking to her back. Her skin was pale, like she hadn't seen sunlight in decades. She was barefoot, wearing what looked like an old tattered dress. They couldn't see her face clearly, but my mom said just looking at her made her stomach twist. They froze. They didn't know if they should run, call for help, or just close their eyes and pretend it wasn't happening. Then the woman stood up slowly, like she'd sensed she was being watched. She turned, looked straight at the window, and smiled. She knew we were there, my mom said, her voice low. And that smile, it wasn't the smile of someone good. But what happened next was even more unbelievable. The woman took a step back, stretched out her arms, and suddenly, her body lifted off the ground. Just like that, no warning, like she'd been pulled up by something invisible. She rose, floating slowly until she vanished into the clouds. They stood there, paralyzed. They didn't scream, didn't run, nothing. They just stood there trying to process what they'd seen. When their grandparents got home, they told them everything, but of course no one believed them. They said it was imagination, exaggeration, kid stuff, but my mom and my aunt swore it was real, and they still swear by it to this day. After that, no one used the fountain anymore, and my mom stopped going into the backyard. Even as an adult, even after she got married and moved out, she still avoided stepping foot back there when she visited her parents. And I inherited that fear. I never saw anything strange in the backyard, but I always felt something off. That feeling of being watched, like there was something there that shouldn't be. But it didn't stop there. During one of those visits when I was older, I asked about the woman at the fountain. I wanted to understand what they'd seen, if they remembered the details. My aunt laughed like she was recalling a good story and said, "That wasn't even the worst of it. Tell him about the siren, Anna." My mom went quiet. She took a long time to answer. She said that one was more complicated, that it involved another family in another place. But after a lot of pressing, she started talking. She said when they were younger, they'd traveled to Florida with their parents. They stayed in a beach house for a few days and heard about a strange case that had happened nearby. A family had been found dead inside their home under bizarre circumstances. No signs of violence, no clues, just dead. And in the living room next to the bodies, a pool of salt water. On the wall mirror, written in what looked like seaweed, were the words, "She sings to those who won't listen." The locals said it was a siren, an entity that lured people in with a melody no one actually heard. They just felt it. A calling, an inexplicable urge to go into the water. But if you resisted, she'd come to you. The story became famous in the area for a while, but it was quickly hushed up. They said it was made up, just local legend. But my mom swears she saw the house. She saw the pool of water being cleaned up by firefighters, and she heard the neighbors whispering about a woman walking along the beach at night, leaving footprints that vanished on their own. After that, the stories didn't stop. Every time we got together, something else strange would come up. A shadow in the mirror, a woman in a red dress standing in the middle of the road, a child crying inside the closet who disappeared when the light was turned on. I started to think my family was surrounded by something that attracted these supernatural experiences. Or maybe my mom and my aunt saw the world differently, a kind of sensitivity that passed down to me, even if in a milder way, because even though I never saw what they saw, I always felt it. At my grandparents' house, time seemed to move differently. Sometimes night fell too fast. Sometimes the clock would stop for a few minutes. And the backyard, always the backyard. I never stopped being afraid of it. When I had to walk through it, I ran. And every now and then, even when no one was around, I'd hear water dripping from the fountain. Even though it had been dry for years, I asked my mom once, "Do you think that really was a witch?" She looked at me, thought for a moment, and said, "I don't know. But whatever it wasn't of this world." That's how I grew up, with stories that sounded like legends but left a very real mark. I don't know what was true, what was exaggerated, or what my mind made up over time, but I do know this. Even now, when I think about the woman floating away, the siren that killed a family, or that strange feeling in the backyard, something inside me locks up. I want to believe it was all made up, that my mom and my aunt just had overactive imaginations. But there are nights when I dream about that house, and I always wake up with the feeling that someone was watching me from the corner of the room. Maybe it's just fear. Maybe it's just the effect of the stories. But part of me believes there's something more. Something that drank from the fountain. Something that's still waiting in the backyard. Scary, right? A sight as disturbing as a witch flying into the sky is something you never forget. But in some homes, evil doesn't just show up. It lingers, watching generation after generation. And that's exactly what happens in the story you're about to hear now, in a grandmother's house filled with mystery. But before we continue the story, if you've made it this far, that means you're enjoying our stories. So hit that like button to let YouTube know you want more videos like this, and don't miss any new horror stories. My grandma's house had that kind of silence that felt like it was carrying too much weight. It wasn't just the quiet of a remote place. It was a heaviness in the air. Even with people talking in the living room, even with pots clanging in the kitchen, it always felt like something else was there, listening to everything. The house sat on the outskirts of a small town, surrounded by thin woods, with an old trailer parked way in the back of the yard. No one had used that trailer in years, but no one touched it either. It was like it had grown into the land, half forgotten but not abandoned. I'd sleep there sometimes when the house was packed with visitors, but the last time I stayed was enough to make me never want to go back. It all really started when I was put to sleep in the back bedroom. That room had always been off. The temperature would drop in a way no blanket could fix. Even with the heat radiating through the rest of the house, that room felt like it had its own winter. I remember lying down, bundled up to my nose, and still feeling that strange cold. Not from the window or the floor, but from the air itself. Like something in there didn't have a human temperature. The first night I tried to ignore it. But around 2 a.m., the silence got thicker. The whole house seemed to hold its breath. I felt it, like even the sound of my own body was muffled. I sat up slowly and went to the window, the one facing the trailer. That's when I saw it. At first, in the glass's reflection, I thought it was just a shadow from the tree outside. But then my eyes adjusted, and I realized there was someone standing at the trailer door. A woman, or something shaped like one. Painfully thin, hunched over, her face hidden behind a thick, tangled mess of hair. Her arm was twisted, like it had been broken and set wrong too many times. She didn't move, just stood there staring at the house. The worst part was when she turned her head toward me. It moved slowly, like her neck was made of rusted wire. And when her eyes met mine, a chill ran through me that I can't even describe. It was like negative energy had just passed straight through me, a shock but cold. So cold. She looked at me like she already knew everything, like she'd been waiting for me to appear at that window. Then she shook her head, slowly, side to side, like she was saying no. Then she raised her hand, long, thin veins bulging, and pointed her crooked finger at me. She shook it too, denying like she was forbidding me from leaving, or warning me about something. And then she was gone. I blinked, and there was nothing. No shadow, no silhouette, nothing at the trailer door. Just darkness and that strange feeling that something was about to happen. But I wasn't scared. Oddly, it was more confusion than panic. I stood there for minutes trying to figure out if I'd really seen it, or if I'd been half asleep. My mind felt slow, distant, like the scene had hypnotized me. The next morning, I didn't say a word. Not to my mom, not to my grandma. I just watched everyone, trying to see if they felt it too, and they did. My aunt mentioned she hadn't been able to sleep right since she arrived, that every time she closed her eyes she felt a presence in the room. My dad's cousin said he'd seen a shadow crawling down the hallway. No one wanted to be alone for too long, but no one said it outright either. It was like everyone knew the house was hiding something, but we all pretended it wasn't. As the days went on, the stories started coming out, bit by bit, each person sharing just a piece. An uncle swore he'd seen a woman standing in the corner of the kitchen in the middle of the night. The neighbor up front said the house had always had a bad reputation, even back in our great-grandfather's time. And most of all, the legends about a witch who had lived in that area long before any houses were built. According to the stories, she lived alone in the woods, performed rituals, spoke to the dead, and brought misfortune to anyone who crossed her path. Over time, these stories started to connect. Like the figure I'd seen at the trailer, my aunt's strange dreams, the shadow in the hallway, and even the cold in the back bedroom. It all felt like parts of the same thing, an energy that still lingered in the place, a residue of something that had never truly left. And that's when it started to click. My whole family had slowly changed since that house entered our lives. First came the fights, then the sadness, then the exhaustion. It was like the house was draining something from us, like we were fading away inside it, little by little. A kind of collective depression, but no one could quite explain it. And all of it had started after my grandma moved in. My grandma never talked much about why she chose that house. She'd say it was quiet, spacious, that the price had been too good to pass up. But after she settled in, she seemed different, quieter, more withdrawn. Always with that distant look, like she was seeing things we couldn't. Over time, she started avoiding the back bedroom. She'd say it gave her headaches, that the air in there was heavy. Sometimes she'd just stop in the middle of the living room, stare out the window and mutter under her breath. I could never make out what she was saying, but it sounded like a conversation. One day, I decided to ask her what she really thought about that house. She took a deep breath, stared at the kettle on the stove for a long time and said, "This house wasn't meant for us to live in. There's old things here, things that don't like being disturbed." I stayed quiet. I asked what she meant by old things, and she answered without looking at me, "Not people, not animals, older, and it's been here a long time." After that conversation, I started noticing everything differently. The crack running from the living room ceiling down to the baseboard looked like the shape of something, a stretched-out body with long arms. The hallway paint always peeled in the same spot, like a hand had been pressed there. And the trailer. The trailer started making noises at night. It wasn't the sound of animals or the wind. It was footsteps. Dry, heavy steps. Sometimes a thud, like someone was walking back and forth inside. One night, I worked up the courage, grabbed my phone's flashlight and went out there. The back gate was slightly ajar, creaking with just the breeze. The yard felt deeper, darker. When I got close to the trailer door, the smell changed. Sour, strong, like old meat mixed with mildew and some kind of herb. A smell that messed with my head. The doorknob was ice cold. When I touched it, I heard a snap from inside, like something had suddenly turned. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. In the side window, the one with the cracked glass, she appeared again. The same figure, closer now. Hollow eyes, no light in them, hair matted to her face. Her skin was cracked like dried clay. She stared at me so intensely I could barely breathe. Her head shook again, slow, side to side. And when she raised her crooked finger, I noticed something different. It was bleeding. The blood dripped slowly from her broken nail onto the windowsill and vanished before it hit the ground. But I could hear it. Each drop made a dry snap like it was falling on hot stone. I ran. I stumbled through the dark, knocking over a planter, tearing my shirt on the fence. I burst into the house, gasping, and my grandma was waiting for me at the kitchen door. Like she already knew where I'd been. She didn't say a word, just pointed at my arm. There was a scratch, and right in the middle of it, a crescent-shaped cut, like a nail had marked me. After that night, my grandma started chaining the back gate shut. She stopped cooking at the same times. She left the porch light off. Little by little, the house grew darker, quieter, like she was trying to hide from something. Like hiding was the only way to stay. My mom decided we needed to leave, sell the house, start over, and that's what we did. But the move didn't take everything with it. In the first few months away, my mom kept having nightmares about the back bedroom. I dreamed about the trailer window. My grandma never adjusted to the new house. She'd say the silence was different, but she still felt when someone was watching her through the window. To this day, when I visit, I notice she never turns her back to the glass door in the living room. She sleeps with one eye half open, and the chain from the back gate is still stored under her bed, wrapped in black cloth. That house was sold. No one in the family lives there anymore. But sometimes when I drive by that street, I look at the backyard and see the trailer still sitting in the same spot, half sunk into the overgrowth, forgotten but whole. And if I stare too long, it feels like there's someone in there, waiting, watching, shaking their head no. Horrifying, right? What did you think of the story? From 0 to 10, what rating would you give it? Leave your opinion down in the comments. I could have sworn the street I turned onto wasn't on any map. I was in Norwich, using my day off to wander the historic downtown, part tourist, part aimless explorer. Norwich Cathedral is breathtaking, you know. That mix of ancient stone, towering stained glass, and the scent of centuries clinging to the air. I went inside, took a lap, snapped some photos. It was a perfect afternoon. Clear sky, sunlight baking the courtyard stones. Peaceful. But then I stepped out through a side door without thinking, and that's when things got weird. The path led to a narrow alley paved with uneven cobblestones. Charming at first glance. Old houses, flowered curtains in the windows, the muffled sound of my own footsteps. And that's the thing, my footsteps. Because aside from that, there was nothing. No birds, no distant traffic, no voices. Just a thick, heavy silence, like the air itself was swallowing sound. It pressed down on me, smothering even my thoughts. At first I thought it was odd, but interesting. I kept walking, taking in the details. A peeling red door, a crooked sign on a brick wall that read something like Chalk Alley or Chapel Yard. I can't remember exactly, but the farther I went, the more the alley seemed to stretch. I turned corner after corner and it never ended. Everything looked the same, but with this creeping, dreamlike wrongness. The sunlight, which had been bright before, started to dim. Not like the day was ending. It was the alley itself, as if the light couldn't penetrate. The air grew heavy, oppressive. That kind of discomfort that doesn't come from outside, but from deep inside you. Like your body knows something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. And then came the feeling of being watched. There was no one there, but I felt it. Like something was right behind me, matching my pace, mirroring my steps. I'd stop suddenly, trying to catch it. Nothing. But my pulse was racing, and those cobblestones, once quaint, now felt like traps, slippery, uneven, forcing me to watch my feet instead of what might be ahead. At some point I stopped. I wanted to turn back, but when I looked behind me, nothing was familiar. The alley wasn't the same. It didn't match the path I'd taken. It was like a maze, twists and turns I didn't remember, and that silence. Heavy, suffocating, the kind that makes you want to scream just to break it. That's when I heard it. A dragging sound like heavy fabric being pulled across the ground. Then breathing, faint, almost imperceptible, but close. Too close. I froze. Every instinct told me to run, but my legs hesitated. I forced myself forward, first slowly, then faster. Then I was sprinting. I don't know how long I ran. All I remember is turning a corner and, just like that, I was out. Like I'd passed through an invisible door. Daylight hit me like a slap. I was on a busy street crowded with people, cars, shops. Disoriented, no idea where I was. I checked my phone. An hour had passed. But to me, it felt like 15 minutes. Tops. I flagged down a woman who looked local, asked where the cathedral was. She pointed in the opposite direction. I'd been walking in circles and ended up in a completely different neighborhood. I went back to my hotel with my head pounding, tried to tell someone, but the more I talked, the more it sounded like I'd imagined it. Still, I decided never to go back there. Something about that place was off. Months later, my friend Laura came to visit. She was excited to see Norwich, and of course she wanted to check out the cathedral. I gave her the short version of what happened in the alley, but she laughed it off as me being dramatic. Late in the afternoon, as we left the church, she spotted the alley and walked ahead, curious. It was the same one. I recognized it instantly. I told her not to go in, but she just laughed and said she'd take a quick look. I watched from a distance. She turned the first corner and vanished. I waited uneasy, and when I was about to follow, she reappeared, smiling. She said the alley was tiny, nothing to it. Just a few steps and it opens up to another street. I swore it didn't make sense. I went in with her, and she was right. Short, bright. The sound of footsteps, birds, voices. Just a normal old alley. I was shaken. Something wasn't adding up. When I got home, I dug into the history of the area. It took a while, but I found an obscure post on a local forum. It said that alley, back in the 17th and 18th centuries, was where they dragged women accused of witchcraft. It was a route between the prison and a makeshift cell behind the cathedral. People claimed to hear screams there at night. Others said the alley would disappear and reappear in different places. Some never came back. After that, I never went near it again. I deleted all the photos from that day, except one, by accident, a blurry shot of the alley's entrance. And if you look closely, there's a silhouette in the background. Looks like a woman, in an old dress, head down. And if you stare too long, it almost seems like she's looking up. But that might just be my mind playing tricks. Or maybe not. What still unsettles me the most? When I mentioned it to Laura, she insisted the alley was a different one. Said the sign read King's Yard. But I know what I saw. The sign said Witch's End. And that's not the name of a tourist alley. That's a warning. And now, after that alley that felt like it twisted time itself, it's clear how certain places hold echoes we should never awaken. If you made it this far, comment the phrase Witchcraft Alley, so I know you walked with me all the way to the end of this journey. If you liked it, drop a like. That's what shows me it was worth sharing these stories with you. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next ones. Always with real style accounts that give chills even to people who think nothing scares them anymore. There's a video right here on the side with more terrifying stories. Click it and keep going with me over there because the night is just getting started.